Hey everybody, this is the part two video to the original story time that I told about the time that I was almost murdered when my ex-boyfriend tried to drown me. So, where did I leave off? I left off with him being in the hospital. The night he had tried to drown me, I had been screaming for help. The neighbors had heard and they called the cops. When the cops came, they took him to the hospital and he was restrained, and they did a catheter to find out if he was on drugs, and they found out he was not on drugs. Um, so then they sent him to the mental health floor of the hospital to be evaluated, having a mental health evaluation. And during this time, even though it was a super, very traumatic event that happened, um, and it was really scary to me, there was something in my mind telling me that I could not walk out and leave him. I could not walk out and leave him or his mother. They both had become very close with me over that year, and the way I looked at it was, he's sick, he's ill. You know, who could walk out on someone that they care about when they need them the most? That's just how I felt about it. I could not walk out on them in a time of need, especially. Should I have went and visited him? Should I have not? I can't say still to this day. But the fact is, I did. I went and visited him every day. I kept in contact with his mother. Um, and so this is how the story went. I went to the hospital every day and visited him. Um, and when he was transferred to the mental health facility, I went there every day. Now, the first couple days that he was in the hospital, he was heavily, once he got to the mental health floor, he was heavily sedated and restrained. So he was pretty much knocked out uh, for the first couple days, really just not even awake. And I would still go and visit just in case he might wake up. I wanted to be a support system for him. I wanted to be there for him. In my mind at the time, I thought that is what you do for the people you care about. You don't ditch them when they're down and out. You be there and you be supportive. So that's what I was doing. Uh, so yeah, he was knocked out for the first couple days completely. And I had had phone conversation with one of my really close good friends, and I told him, about everything that happened. I really opened up and I told him everything, because at the time when this was happening, I didn't tell everybody every part of it. You know, I was just nervous to tell everyone. I didn't want to hear their judgments, and I didn't want them to think that, my ex, my then boyfriend, my now ex, I didn't want them to think he was evil, because I knew he wasn't. I knew he was genuinely a good person, and that something was just really crazy happening to him. But I had this one really good friend who I could open up to and tell him everything. So I called him on the phone and I told him everything that had happened. Basically the entire story that I told you guys. Because nowadays I do feel comfortable telling this story. It's been years ago. Like I said, it was originally in like 2008 when this happened, and ran into 2009. So back then, even though I didn't feel comfortable telling everybody every detail, nowadays I feel more comfortable with it. I've made peace with it, and so I feel more comfortable with it. But at the time, I called my very close good friend and I told him what had happened. Um, him being Catholic gave him a certain perspective. I'm sure that, aided in his perspective at the time. And he was telling me that it sounded like to him that maybe there was some sort of spirit or possession or something like that going on. Now, in my mind, I thought this was like, whoa, what? What? Isn't that just in the movies? Like, is that real? Um, but at the time, I was like grasping at straws. I was trying to figure out what had happened to my boyfriend. Why was he suddenly a different person, and why was he trying to kill me when he had always been very loving and lighthearted and kind and funny? It was just a total flip switch. So I was up to hear any perspective, any point of view that might help. And this friend was and is still to this day, a very, very good friend of mine. But I talked to my friend on the phone, and he had talked to me for quite a while, and we talked about the idea of it maybe being some sort of like possession. It sounds weird to say that actually, but you know, it is what it is. I was investigating all avenues of this scenario and what it could be. And so I talked to him about that, and he said, maybe you should have a priest talk to him or pray with him, or, try to go that route. Up until this point, we'd only been talking to doctors. And the doctors were doing their part in diagnosing him, keeping him safe, keeping him from harming other people, and trying to figure out what was going on. After talking to my friend, I thought, well, what harm could it do? Maybe he's right. Maybe I should talk to a priest. It was some really bizarre characteristics going on that I can't explain. Maybe it's mental health, maybe it's possession. I just really didn't know, and I was searching for answers. So when I went back to the hospital to visit the next time, I went to talk to the priest of the hospital, because it was a hospital that had a priest and a church within it and things like that. So I went and talked to the priest, and I told the priest what happened, and he said, well, do you think I should go pray with him? And I said, well, I don't know. That's why I'm talking to you. What do you think is best? And the priest said, I'm going to go pray with him and talk with him. And I told the priest, well, he's been sedated for several days. I don't know if he'll be awake when you get there. But the priest said, no worries. I'll just stop in. I'll at least say a prayer with him. If he's sedated, that's not a big deal. I'll pray over him, and we'll take it from there. And I was like, okay, whatever we could do that might possibly help, why not try it? So I went ahead and went to work that day, because I had stopped in the morning time before work to visit, and he had been sedated when I saw him, and then I talked to the priest after that. So then I went to work, and that day after I got off of work, I did not have any class. I was in college at the time, but after I got off work that day, there was no class. So I was able to go back to the hospital and have another visit. When I got back, to my surprise, he was awake. They said that they were going to try out letting him not be sedated and see how it went. And I was really surprised because he wasn't even restrained when I got there. He was up and actually holding a Bible in his arms, like clutching a Bible, like hugging it. So when I walked in, I hadn't physically spoken to him in days, because he had been sedated. And I said, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? Now, keep in mind, he was really beaten up. I mean, he had literally gotten into a huge brawl of a fight with the police. So he had like bruises and black eyes, and he was just really beaten up. He had also tried to fight the doctors and the nurses. So, I mean, he was like physically bruised and battered and things like that. I asked him, how are you doing? How do you feel? His response was, I'll try to, imitate it for you. He was like, I'm great. I feel wonderful. Wow. Everything is perfect. Everything is wonderful. I'm so happy and I feel so good. Everything is great. Isn't everything so great? And I was like, whoa. In my mind. I didn't say that to him, but in my mind I was like, whoa. Another flip, another switch. Like, what? Like, he went from being himself to being like completely evil and mean and trying to murder me, to then being sedated, to then waking up and being completely elated, happy, like overly happy, like extremely happy. And to look at someone who's beaten up with black eyes and bruises and hear them say how elated and happy and feeling great they are, it was just kind of like mind blowing to me. I was like, what? But I didn't respond in a negative way because, I was happy, first of all, that he felt good, and I wanted to be supportive. I said, great, I'm so glad you feel good. I'm really glad you're feeling better, and I'm really glad that you're up and about, and, things are going better for you. And he said, I had a visitor today. And then I was thinking, oh, it was probably the priest. The priest probably came while he was awake and talked to him. And I said, oh, did the priest come and visit you? And he said, no, no priest came and visit me. He said, Jesus came and visited me. And I was like, what do you mean? Now, also, I kept in mind at the time that he was on medication. Like, even though he wasn't sedated, he was on medication. So I thought maybe the medication was making him have, like, super happy feelings, and feel so much better. Whatever it was, I was glad he wasn't evilly trying to kill me. Is evilly even a word? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. You get my point. I was just glad he wasn't trying to kill me. He was happy. All right. But when he looked at me and said, Jesus came and visited me today, that took me back for a second. And I was like, are you sure it wasn't the priest? And he said, no, it was not a priest. It was Jesus. He said, Jesus came and visited me, and he held my hand, and he told me that everything was going to be okay, and he told me that I didn't need to worry anymore, that he was with me, and everything was going to be fine, and I feel so happy, and I feel so good since Jesus came to visit me. And I was like, wow. And he went on in detail just telling me how Jesus walked in, took him by the hand, talked with him, and told him that everything was going to be okay. Now, like I said, he was clutching a Bible, he was hugging a Bible, and he held it up and showed it to me, and it was the Bible that he had gotten out of the dresser drawer from the hospital. And so I was like, okay, well, obviously he still was not back to his regular self, but it was better. What I was seeing was better than him being evil and trying to murder me, right? So I was like, okay, I went on with the visit, and it was like, all right. And I left for that day, and throughout the next couple days to the next week or so, he remained in the hospital on the mental health floor. And he started saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. He carried on this persona, this way of being where he was very happy, very elated, very, very energetically happy for the next, week or so. And he really wanted to go home. The hospital would not release him. They said that this was part of his manic episode, his psychotic episode, where they can switch and flip back and forth between being very, very down and being very, very happy. So they said for his circumstances, according to like the psychologist and the counselor he was seeing and the doctor, his happiness didn't feel, I guess, what is the word? I can't remember their exact words, but they let me know that his happiness didn't seem like it was genuinely matching like his experience. Like they said, someone who's been beaten up, someone who's been through such a horrible experience, someone who's went through everything that he's went through would not normally respond extremely happy and be like, oh, it's a great day, it's such a wonderful day, I've been restrained to the hospital bed and beaten up, and oh my God, I tried to do this and that, to the doctors and nurses, I tried to beat everyone up, and I'm so happy. Like, they told me that's not the typical reaction. and they didn't feel like he was all right enough to be released. So I told him, you know, they're still getting things done. They're working on it. They're going to let you go home just as soon as they can, but they have to make sure you're okay first. And I talked to him each day trying to soothe that because he really, really wanted to go home. Now, after 2 weeks of being on the mental health floor in the hospital and being in this extremely elated, happy state, clutching and carrying that Bible everywhere he went, they then said they were going to transfer him to a mental facility. So he was going to go to an actual mental facility instead of just being at the hospital on the mental health floor. He was kind of saddened by this because he really wanted to go home and he didn't understand why he had to go to this mental facility. But to me, I could still tell that he was not himself. He just wasn't. He was not himself. And so I kind of understood, like, yeah, we want to get him help. We want to get him back to his normal self, right? So, okay, they transferred him to the mental facility. Again, I went every day and visited him. Let me describe to you what it was like to drive up to this mental facility because it was eerie. It was crazy. I felt like I was in a movie. Literally, I thought that to myself, like, I feel like I'm in a movie right now. Is this really my life? Is this really happening to me? Like, what is going on? Because when I would go to the mental facility, I would have to I would turn off I would have to turn off of like a main busy traffic road, and I would turn onto this long lane, this long narrow lane. And driving up to the mental facility, there were like big huge trees along the lane. And I remember one day specifically, it was a sunset. The sun was going down. And I was driving up the lane, and it was the time of year where the leaves are not on the tree. So the trees were all bare. And I was driving up the lane, and I could just see these birds swooping from one tree to the next. This huge mass of birds just flying from one tree over to the next, and the trees were just like really eerie looking, and it was getting dark, and it was just a really eerie feeling as I drove up the lane. And you could see the big mental facility looming, like this big, eerie, dark building just looming in the background as I drove up this lane with these big overcasting trees and these birds flying, and it really felt like it was something out of a movie. I was like, wow, this is crazy. To me, that's how I felt at the time. I thought, this is crazy. What am I doing? But I reminded myself that this is someone I cared about, and I was going to stay by their side. I was going to help them. That's what I was going to do. So I drove up to the mental facility, and I definitely noticed right away, first time being there, this is not a hospital. Like, it was not a hospital. Hospitals don't have armed guards at the doors usually, from what I knew. And there were armed guards at the door. There were metal detectors. I had to be searched before I could go in and visit. My purse and my belongings had to be searched. And I had to be escorted to a visiting area. So you could not go into their actual rooms where they stayed. You had to go to a common visiting area where everybody who was there to visit was sitting in this big room visiting with their loved one who was in this mental facility. So after being searched and going through the metal detectors and all of that, they took me to the visiting area. And I was like, okay, so I sat and I waited for him to come in because they took me there and then they had to go get him and bring him in. The first time he walked in, it was really like eerie because he was really stiff, like his body, like movements were really stiff, like his arms were like stiff to him, and he just looked out of it. But he was clutching this Bible. He was still carrying a Bible with him. I had found out that his mother had brought his Bible from home, or her Bible from home, a Bible from home, to him because he asked her, when he left the hospital, he wasn't allowed to take their Bible from the hospital, so he asked her, please bring me a Bible, so she did. So he walked in carrying that Bible, and he just seemed kind of out of it, but he also seemed like stiff. Like, yeah, his body was just stiff. Um, Again, not himself at all, but I was under, the impression that they were checking out different medications. They were trying to figure out which medication would be best for him. And so I figured this might be side effect from medication. And so I sat and visited with him, and he was just kind of lethargic that time, just kind of like head, going down every now and then, kind of like, just kind of out of it. So, anyways, time went on, and he was actually in that mental facility for a little over a month. And I can remember specifically one other time that I went and visited him, because, like I said, I went every day. One other time that was really bizarre that I went to visit him, I was in the waiting area waiting for him to come in. And when he came in, as always, he was clutching and holding his Bible tight to him. And he walked up to me, and he was like sad. He was like scared. And he said, are you okay? And I said, well, yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? And he said, well, I'm just really upset because this girl in here, she said that she took a piece of your hair. Because I guess some other time when I had visited him, I don't know, when I hugged him or something like that, a piece of my hair got on him or something. But this girl told him that she took a piece of my hair and she was going to put a curse on me, and she was going to do all this harm to me. And he was really freaked out by it. He really believed her, and he was really scared that day. And I reassured him not to worry about that, because I told him I don't believe in that, so it can't do any harm to me. And that was my response. And I soothed him, and I got him to feel better about it. And so he let that go, and it didn't come up anymore. But yeah, it was just like he really, really was terrified about that. It was just out of character for him. Just something else to be out of character. Now, by a couple weeks in the mental facility, they had been playing around with the medications and finding things that worked and things that were not working, and so on. I can remember one day I went to the mental facility to visit him, and they told me that he was not allowed to have any visit that day. And I asked why. And they said because he had hurtled over the nurse's desk and started making a scene, started making a ruckus, just started like freaking out and causing a lot of trouble and trying to fight the staff at the mental facility. So again, he was sedated, and he was strapped onto the bed, and he would not be able to have visits that day. So it was like a roller coaster of emotion. Some days he seemed kind of okay, sometimes he seemed way not okay. I never once saw him to be the person I knew him to be before this happened. Anytime I went to visit, I never did see that version of him that I knew before come out or come back. But after about a little over a month in the mental facility, he was released, and he was on medication. They had tried out a couple different kinds of medication, and I do remember the one that finally seemed to get him close to what he was before was like Abilify and Seroquel at bedtime. And I can't remember, there was another one, but I can't remember what it was. So that mixture of medication seemed to be helping. And they said over time he would get used to it more, and his regular personality, who he was prior, would start to come back even more. And again, I wanted to be there to be a support system and help him and his mother. I cared about these people very much. So when he was released from the mental facility, I thought it would be good that he went and stayed with his mother, and everybody agreed on that. Um, but they had asked me to come stay there also. His mother and him had asked me to come stay there also. Um, so I went and stayed with them for a little bit of time when he got out of the mental facility at his mother's house. I still had my apartment, but it was kind of nice for me to stay at his mother's too, because going into my apartment really freaked me out, because of the traumatic event that had happened there for me. It was scary to me to go back and relive those moments of, him trying to drown me. So it was nice. It was nice to not stay there, even though, I was staying with the person who had actually done that. It was like I just kept in mind that he was sick, and anyways, I stayed with him at his mother's for a little while after he left the mental facility. And I started noticing really strange things happening, like as if he was dipping back into the scary parts of it. For example, he started saying strange things to me again once he got back home to his mother's. Like, like one time I remember he went like this. He went to me, like he was touching, like, but he did it to me. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Are you good or are you evil?" And I was like, "Well, of course I'm good. I'm here. I'm trying to help you. I want to help you get better. And he would do things like, "I'm watching you." And I'm like, "What in the hell is going on? Like, oh my God, not again." So it was scary. It was scary. And like I said, when I look back now, I don't know if I was doing the right thing or not by being there, but I was just trying to help. And so, anyways, over time of staying at his mother's, he seemed to get better. Those moments of him, you know, thinking I was evil and all that started to fade away, and his medication started to help a little more, it seemed. Um, Getting his medication was a big ordeal. It really was. Because the medication was extremely expensive. It cost a lot. Um, he had no health insurance, and it was like literally almost $1,000 a month for all his medication. So because it cost so much, we had to go to the county hospital. Now, we lived up by Chicago in Cook County, and in Cook County, there is a county hospital. Well, at the time there, I don't know. I've moved away from Cook County for a while now, so I don't know how it is now. But at the time when I lived there, about 2008 to 2009, you could go to the county hospital and get free treatment if you were eligible, which meant if you were unemployed, if you were disabled, you could go get this free health care. So this is what we did in order to get his medication. We went to the free county hospital. In order to be seen at the county hospital, though, you would have to get up super early in the morning, well, to me, super early, which was like 6 a.m., and go to the hospital and stand in line. Outside, they open the door at 7, but if you didn't get there really early, you were going to be standing around the block waiting, because that's how many people were waiting in line to go to this county hospital. So we would get there by, 6:30, 7 in the morning, get in line, and I am not exaggerating one bit. We would literally sit for 6 to 7 hours every single time we went, and we had to go once a month. We would sit for 6 or 7 hours waiting to be seen because there were so many people and not enough doctors to see everybody super quickly. It's a free hospital, a free clinic, whatever you call it. So yeah, it was like a very long wait. We would have to spend 6 to 7 hours sitting and waiting. And we did that though, because without his medication, what would happen? Would he turn back into that person that was trying to murder me? Like, Not sure. And so, anyways, I went with him every single month to sit at the hospital. I drove him. We got his medication, and he stayed on the medication for a good amount of time. And then he started saying that he didn't want to take his medication. After some months had went by, he said, "I don't want to take my medication anymore. I'm all better now. I don't need it." And I tried to explain to him, "You're better because you're on the medication." Because that's what the doctors had told me. So I tried to explain it to him. You're better because you're on the medication. If you go off the medication, you could go into another psychotic episode. He didn't care. He did not want to take his medicine anymore. So he stopped taking it. I was really, really terrified because, what if he tried to kill me again? Literally, I was terrified. Um, Shortly after he stopped taking his medicine, I found out that he was what they call self-medicating. He had gotten into some really, really hardcore drugs. Um, really hardcore drugs. Uh, and that took my life on a downward spiral that was horrible. Horrible. Um, Everything in my life turned to crap. And I told him, I said, "I don't want this in my life anymore." I realized that me trying to be there for him and me trying to help him, in the meantime, my life was deteriorating. It was taking such a toll on me as a person and on my life that I literally watched everything in my life just going to shit, to be honest. So eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I told him, "I can't be your girlfriend anymore um, if you're going to keep doing this. I'll help you to stop doing it. But if you're going to keep doing this, these drugs and living your life this way, I can't do this anymore." And he said, "I'm going to do this with or without you." And that's when I said, "Well, I can't be your girlfriend anymore. You can take your things, whatever you feel you need, out of my apartment, but you need to leave." So he called his mother. He told her to come get him. And she did, and he packed up his things and he left. And that was it. I had literally felt I had done every single thing I could, and it was time to put my own life back together. It was time to focus on myself and get myself in a better place. And I moved forward from there. And now, years later, I have a life that I'm very happy about. I graduated college in 2010, and I ended up having a child who I love and adore, a dream come true. Um, I am in a relationship. I have a beautiful house in a beautiful area that I love and adore. So things went really well for me once I left that situation. As for him, he's in prison right now. Um, he is in prison for attempted armed robbery. So I read the article on it, and I guess he tried to rob a Dunkin' Donuts, um, and he had a weapon, and he got caught. So he is in prison, and yeah, that's where the road that he chose took him, was prison. And I still wish him all the best. I still hope that somehow he could have a good, productive, happy life. Um, I feel for him, and I really feel for his mother, because she is a wonderful, beautiful person, and I still love her to this day, and she's literally devoted her life to him, trying to help him, and I really wish the best for them. But that's how that ended up. And I don't know, what do you think? You can let me know in the comments if you want. Do you think he was possessed by some demon? Do you think he had a mental illness? What what do you think? I really still to this day don't know. I don't know what happened. I just know that the person who I was with before never came back. He never came back. It almost feels like he died, to be honest, because that person that I loved and cared about never came back. So, anyways, it still gets me like a little emotional because it's just such an odd scenario, it's just an odd thing to happen. But there is a positive to it, If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I like to find the positive in everything. And I will look for the positive in even the worst situations. And the positive that I took from this whole thing was love yourself. Love yourself. It's not selfish to love yourself, to care about yourself. That's not selfish. Because when you love yourself, that is when you can even more fully love other people. When you love yourself, that is when you can even more fully be there for other people. And when you love yourself, you're putting yourself in a happy state of being, and with that comes clarity and better decision making. So I definitely learned to love myself more and value myself and know my own self-worth, because that is really important. Like I said, I let my whole life fall apart because I was loving someone else so much that I didn't care about myself. And I never really could help them. And I realized the positive that I took from this, the lesson that I learned from this, was in order to help others, in order to serve others, and in order to really be there for others, I really have to love myself. And I have to care about myself, and I have to know my own self-worth. And that whole situation really shot me into looking into who am I, getting to know myself better, searching, discovering what am I interested in, who is Becca, who am I, and it led me down the path of spirituality. It led me down a path of finding amazing things that literally just fill me with so much joy, like I can't even tell you, So this horrible, dark, terrible, terrifying situation that happened sprung me into a completely new direction of self-love, self-exploration, spirituality, and just like all kinds of amazing things, amazing journey I've been on, since then. And so I definitely see value in even the dark and negative feeling times, because from that I learned so much, and from that I created such a desire within me to know more and to experience goodness. So yeah, that is the end of the story. There you go. If you have any questions, if there's something I forgot to explain that you might be thinking of, hit me up, let me know in the comments. Like I said, let me know. What do you think? Was it possession? Was it mental illness?